Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in sophomore English. We are now, after our study of Antigone in your hymnals on page 869 and following, going to do what your textbook company likes to call comparing literary works. We're going to look at a cutting from Ibsen's An Enemy of the People. Now, just to remind you, you can write this down at 3A already. We've seen Ibsen's Doll's House, just a brief cutting from Doll's House earlier. Before we get into this title, though, and introduce ourselves more formally to Ibsen, let's go to page 868 quickly, comparing universal and culturally specific themes. Read with me. The theme of a literary work is its message. Often the changes that a main character experiences in a literary work are related to the work's theme. For example, a character may be faced with a moral dilemma. Let's make sure we write that down at 2B. A conflict that challenges the character's beliefs about wrong and right. How the character resolves the dilemma, or what he or she learns from facing the dilemma, may point toward the theme. Themes may have aspects that are culturally specific, reflecting the circumstances and beliefs of the writer's culture and time period. In contrast, the theme may also have aspects that are universal, or that are meaningful to people of all times and places. For instance, an ancient poem might tell of an arrogant warrior who does not obey his people's traditions and who's punished by the gods. The poem's theme is culturally specific because it reflects the beliefs of the culture. The gods punish those who do not obey our traditions. The poem also expresses a universal theme, one that people of all times and places can appreciate. No one is above the law. In the ancient Greek play Antigone, Antigone bravely defies a king. In the 19th century European drama, An Enemy of the People, that's the text we're about to look at, a doctor bravely defies his brother and boss, the mayor. The local or cultural specific elements of each play are different, yet both plays express an important universal theme. You'll want to write this down already at 2A. Here we go for Enemy of the People. The theme, people, may be torn between duty to authority and some higher value, no doubt. And then using a diagram like the one provided here, this will help you. Again, on page 869, our big question in this unit is, to what extent does experience determine what we perceive? Let's introduce ourselves quickly to Ibsen. Reintroduce to Ibsen. Notice again our dates, 1828 to 1906. Again, born in Norway, Ibsen was a pioneer of modern realistic drama. You want to write that down, modern realistic drama. The popular drama of his day specialized in idealized heroes, ridiculous buffoons, happy endings. Breaking with convention, Ibsen showed ordinary people facing grimly realistic problems. Instead of developing perfect heroes and utter villains, he presented psychologically complex characters. I'd write that down. Psychologically complex characters with a mix of good and bad motives. Ibsen also offered a brutally honest look at cutting-edge issues of his day. For instance, as we've already seen, his play Doll's House concerns women's rights, a subject that was highly controversial in the 19th century. Outraged by such inflammatory subject matter, critics condemned him. In the end, though, Ibsen triumphed. Today, his plays are considered classics, and his realistic approach to character, plot, dialogue, staging continues to influence drama. Let's turn now to page 870. We'll start with the background information at the top of 870. At the opening of the play, An Enemy of the People, at the opening of the play, the future looks good for Dr. Thomas Stockman's hometown. The town has finally opened a health resort for visitors who come to drink and bathe in the local water, which is said to have healthful effects, kind of like our Thermopolis just up the road. Just when the town is beginning to benefit from the new business, however, Dr. Stockman makes an alarming discovery. Sewage from a nearby industrial town is polluting the water. As Dr. Stockman explains to his wife, his oldest child Petra, and a few friends, the town will have to relocate the pipes that feed the baths in order to prevent the spread of disease. He has sent a report on the problem to his brother Peter, mayor of the town. The next morning, Peter pays him a visit. Now, this social drama harshly criticizes the values of late 19th century Europe and explores the ethical relationships between people. Ibsen illustrates society's ills in plays such as this one, as well as his play Ghosts and Doll's House, in an effort to cure these ills. The moral dilemma presented to the mayor and the attacks his brother faces mirror the complications of modern life that Ibsen invariably examines in his plays, the struggles between truth and profit, authority and reform, morality and popular culture. Now in this selection, Okay, and write this down. This is excerpt from the second act of a 4-act play. It takes place at Dr. Stockman's home. Okay, the doctor's brother, Mayor Stockman, has come to control the damage that the release of the report will have on business at the baths. He initially tries to cajole his brother, in other words, influence him softly. But faced with the doctor's stubborn adherence to scientific truth, the mayor ends up threatening him with economic reprisals. Now our question is simply this, write it down at 3A. In what ways does this cutting from Enemy of the People, Ibsen's play, correspond or inform your reading of Antigone, the play that we just finished, in which, of course, Antigone will defy Creon, and then, of course, Haemon will defy Creon. And we have that negative energy that's created that culminates, of course, at the end of the play with the death of Antigone, the death of Haemon, the death of course, Creon's wife, and what seems to be suggested, the death of Creon quickly to follow. All right, let's follow along now. Again, we'll just have a few lines of this play. I want you to get a sense, though, of the tension that is created in this text.
From An Enemy of the People, Henrik Ibsen, entering from the hall.
Good morning.
Good to see you, Peter.
Morning, Peter. How's everything with you?
Just so, thank you. Yesterday, after office hours, I received a report from you discussing the condition of the water at the baths.
Yes. Have you read it?
I have.
What have you got to say about it? Glancing at the others.
Come along, Petra.
She and Petra go into the room on the left.
871.
Was it necessary to press all these investigations behind my back?
Well, as long as I didn't have absolute proof, then...
And now you think you do?
You must be convinced of that yourself.
Is it your object to put this document before the board of directors by way of an official recommendation?
Of course. Something has to be done about this, and fast.
As usual, in your report, you let your language get out of hand. You say, among other things, that what we're offering our summer visitors is guaranteed poison.
But, Peter, how else can you describe it? You've got to realize this water is poison for internal or external use, and is foisted on poor, suffering creatures who turn to us in good faith and pay us exorbitant fees to gain their health back again.
And then you arrive at the conclusion, by your line of reasoning, that we have to build a sewer to drain off these so-called impurities from Maladal, and that all the water mains have to be relayed.
Well, do you see any other way out? I don't.
I invented a little business this morning down at the town engineer's office, and in a half-joking way, I brought up these proposals as something we perhaps ought to take under advisement at some time in the future.
Some time in the future?
He smiled at my whimsical extravagance, naturally. Have you gone to the trouble of estimating just what these proposed changes would cost? From the information I received, the expenditure would probably run up into several 100,000 crowns.
As high as that?
Yes, but that's not the worst. The work would extend over at least 2 years.
2 years?
872.
2 full years?
At the least. And meanwhile, what do we do with the baths? Shut them down? Yes, we'll have to. Do you really think anyone would make the effort to come all the distance here if the rumor got out that the water was contaminated?
Well, yes, but Peter, that's what it is.
And then all this happens now, just now, when the baths were being recognized. Other towns in this area have the same resources for development as health resorts. Don't you think they'll leap at the chance to attract the whole flow of tourists to them? No question of it. And there we are, left stranded. We'll most likely have to abandon the whole costly enterprise, and then you'll have ruined the town you were born in.
I? Ruined?
It's through the baths alone that this town has any future to speak of. You can see that just as plain as I can.
But then, what do you think ought to be done?
From your report, I'm unable to persuade myself that the condition of the baths is as critical as you claim.
Look, if anything, it's worse. Or it'll be that by summer when the warm weather comes.
Once again, I think you're exaggerating considerably. A capable doctor must know the right steps to take. He should be able to control toxic elements and to treat them if they make their presence too obvious.
And then, what else?
The water system for the baths as it now stands is simply a fact and clearly has to be accepted as such. But in time, the directors will more than likely agree to take under consideration to what extent, depending on the funds available, they can institute certain improvements.
And you can think I'd play along with that kind of trickery?
Trickery?
Yes, it's a trick, a deception, a lie, an out-and-out crime against the public and society at large.
As I've already observed, I've not yet persuaded myself that there's any real impending danger here.
873.
Yes, you have. There's no alternative. My report is perfectly accurate. I know that. And you're very much aware of it, Peter, but you won't admit it. You're the one who got the baths and the water system laid out where they are today, and it's this hellish miscalculation that you won't concede. Ah, you don't think I can see right through you?
And even if it were true, even if I seem a bit over-anxious about my reputation, it's all for the good of the town. Without moral authority, I could hardly guide and direct affairs in the way I believe serves the general welfare. For this reason, among many others, it strikes me as imperative that your report not be submitted to the board of directors. It has to be withheld for the common good. Then later, I'll bring the matter up for discussion, and we'll do the very best we can as quietly as possible. But nothing, not the slightest word of this catastrophe must leak out to the public.
My dear Peter, there's no stopping it now.
It must, and it will be stopped.
I'm telling you, it's no use. Too many people know already.
Know already? Who? Not those fellows from the Courier.
Why, of course they know. The independent liberal press is going to see that you do your duty.
You're an exceptionally thoughtless man, Thomas. Haven't you considered the consequences that can follow for you?
Consequences? For me?
For you and your family as well.
What the devil does that mean?
I think, over the years, I've proved a helpful and accommodating brother to you.
Yes, you have, and I'm thankful to you for that.
I'm not after thanks, because in part I was forced into it for my own sake. I always hoped I could keep you in check somewhat if I helped better your economic status.
874.
What? Just for your own sake?
In part, I said. It's embarrassing for a public servant when his closest relative goes and compromises himself again and again.
And that's what you think I do?
Yes, unfortunately you do. Without your knowing it, you have a restless, unruly, combative nature. And then this unhappy knack of bursting into print on all kinds of likely and unlikely subjects. You're no sooner struck by an idea than right away you have to scribble a newspaper article on it, or a whole pamphlet even.
Well, but isn't it a citizen's duty to inform the public if he comes on a new idea?
Oh, the public doesn't need new ideas. The public is served best by the good old time-tested ideas it's always had.
That's putting it plainly.
I have to talk to you plainly for once. Up till now, I've always tried to avoid that because I know how irritable you are. But now I'm telling you the truth, Thomas. You have no conception how much you injure yourself with your impetuosity. You complain about the authorities and, yes, the government. You rail against them and insist you're being passed over and persecuted. But what can you expect? Someone as troublesome as you.
Ah, so I'm troublesome, too.
Yes, Thomas. You're a very troublesome man to work with. I know from experience. You show no consideration at all. You seem to forget completely that I'm the one you can thank for your post here as staff physician at the baths.
I was the inevitable choice. I and nobody else. I was the first to see that this town could become a flourishing spa, and I was the only one who could see it then. I stood alone fighting for that idea for years, and I wrote and wrote.
Unquestionably.
875.
The right moment hadn't arrived yet. Of course you couldn't judge that from up there in the wilds. But when the opportune time came, and I and a few others took the matter in hand.
Yes, and bungled the whole magnificent plan. Oh yes, it's really coming out now what a brilliant crew you've been.
All that's coming out to my mind is your usual hunger for a good fight. You want to attack your superiors. It's your old pattern. You can't stand any authority over you. You resent anyone in a higher position and regard him as a personal enemy. And then one weapon's as good as another to use. But now I've acquainted you with the vital interest at stake here for this whole town. And naturally for me as well. And so I'm warning you, Thomas. I'll be adamant about the demand I'm going to make of you.
What demand?
Since you've been so indiscreet as to discuss this delicate issue with outsiders, even though it should have been kept secret among the directors, it of course can't be hushed up now. All kinds of rumors will go flying around, and the maliciously inclined will dress them up with trimmings of their own. It'll therefore be necessary that you publicly deny these rumors.
How? I don't understand.
We can expect that. After further investigation, you'll arrive at the conclusion that things are far from being as critical or dangerous as you'd first imagined.
Ah, you expect that.
Moreover, we expect that you'll support and publicly affirm your confidence in the present directors to take thorough and conscientious measures as necessary to remedy any possible defects.
But that's utterly out of the question for me, as long as they try to get by with patchwork. I'm telling you that, Peter, and it's my unqualified opinion.
876.
As a member of the staff, you're not entitled to any personal opinions.
Not entitled?
As a staff member, I said. As a private person, why, that's another matter. But as a subordinate official at the Baths, you're not entitled to express any opinions that contradict your superiors.
That's going too far. I, as a doctor, a man of science, aren't entitled to...
What's involved here isn't a purely scientific problem. It's a mixture of both technical and economic considerations.
I don't care what it is. I want the freedom to express myself on any problem under the sun.
Anything you like, except for the Baths. We forbid you that.
You forbid? You, a crowd of...
I forbid it. I, your supervisor. And when I forbid you, then you obey.
Now, really quickly, you can go ahead and write down at 3A the ways in which this cutting works very well with a certain number of moments in Sophocles' Antigone, yes? So let's go ahead at level 1 and let's just quickly summarize what's going on here. You've got a man who, as a doctor and a scientist, recognizes potential danger in the future with poisoned water. A few years ago in Flint, Michigan, you'll maybe remember or recall, we had a similar kind of a situation where we had bad water and individuals were sickened by that bad water. You've got something very similar going on here. Of course, many readers of this text have looked at, for example, the current debate about global warming and environmental problems on the planet and all of that. Here you've got a scientist who is saying to his brother, superior, mayor of the town, the one interested in the economics of it, we got to shut this project down. There is no way this is good for us and good for the future of our community health-wise. Of course, the brother, who is the mayor, who is his supervisor, is interested in the money that will be lost. Money's already been spent, invested, and therefore money's lost. To which, of course, the response is, I forbid you from making any more public comments like this at all. Notice it gets personal between the two brothers, where, for example, he will say to his bro, you've always been like this. You're the one that feels you need to stir up controversy. Today, of course, we have a huge debate in journalism about what is often referred to as fake news. That is to say, information that's presented as somehow authentic, but is actually inauthentic. And both sides of the political spectrum, of course, accuse the other of this kind of thing. Notice, though, it's fairly obvious that the brother who's the mayor recognizes the validity of the fact that there's poisoned water in the baths, but he wants to keep it quiet so that he can make a lot of money. Let's jump to 2A really quickly. What for you is a major message here in terms of the challenge of what happens when you have a fact you know is accurate, and yet you have to go against the power elite, the authority? Do you stand up and fight, or do you keep it all to yourself and let finances, kind of happen? This remains one of those really kind of penultimate questions, doesn't it, in the history of the world. When you have information, do you share that information, or do you keep quiet? Go to 3A quickly. When you're a senior, we're going to study Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. And when we do that, we're going to meet the partner, one of his famous constructions, and there we'll resurrect this same question all over again. In your junior year, write this down at 3A, we're going to study Hawthorne's classic Scarlet Letter, which will play the exact same game. Should you come full disclosure when you are guilty of something and thereby hurt your reputation, but at least you're honest? Or should you hide that from the public and somehow try and protect the public by not making these revelations? Note the irony here. In secrecy, you're not protecting the public. You're actually just protecting those who are the investors and, of course, the mayor brother himself. At 2B, let's jot this one down. What is the conflict here? Well, obviously, we've got, just like Antigone, we've got two kinds of conflict. Yes, external, character versus character. But we've also got an internal conflict as well, don't we? That is to say, to make the revelation or not to make the revelation. And to what degree is our hero here, our protagonist, going to feel somewhat attacked? Now, in a text like this, jot down at 2B, who is the protagonist? Who is the antagonist? It's fairly clear, yes, that the two brothers are now going against each other in some way. At 3A, well, we can obviously think about the most famous stories of brothers. Cain and Abel obviously comes to mind. What is for you, though, the text? It might be a movie, might be a song that says you have to fight against the power and the authority, especially when you know you're right, especially when it has anything to do with protecting others. And finally, at 3B, what for you is the most common example of this that you can think of? Many students will say issues of global warming or environmental concerns. There's, of course, large corporations and industry and governmental powers that are obviously very much wanting to protect financial investments, even at the expense of the public at times. Or they'll make the same argument. This is not real science. We don't have enough facts. We really don't know. Of course, here's the challenge with